Lena loved her quiet life. Her little house sat at the end of a winding street lined with old oak trees, whose leaves whispered whenever the wind passed. She had inherited the land from her parents, a modest property with a small garden she tended every morning. Flowers of every color grew in neat rows, and the soil smelled fresh after a morning of rain. She often spent hours planting, watering, and pruning, finding peace in the simplicity of caring for something that belonged entirely to her. Her neighbors knew her as someone polite but firm. She wasn't the type to start conflicts, but she valued her privacy. A few small wooden signs marked the boundaries of her land. Private property, no trespassing. Most people passed by without paying much attention, but Lena knew that these signs mattered. They were her first line of defense, not just against strangers, but against the world slowly encroaching on her space. That calm life started to change on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Lena had just finished watering her garden when she heard the low rumble of engines. At first, she thought it was one of the trucks that occasionally passed her street on deliveries, but the sound grew louder, more frequent. Then she saw them. Cement trucks, big, gray, imposing, moving slowly down her quiet street. Lena frowned. They weren't just passing. They were stopping, and something about their presence felt wrong. Curiosity mixed with unease as she watched from her porch. The first truck turned into the small lot adjacent to her property. Workers climbed out, measuring the ground, marking spots, and talking in low voices. Lena's heart raced. She had not seen a single notice about construction in her neighborhood. No one had informed her, no one had asked permission, and certainly no official paperwork had been delivered to her home. She walked toward them, careful but firm, her hands on her hips. "Excuse me," she called out. "This is private property. You can't just be here." The workers paused. One man, apparently in charge, adjusted his hard hat and looked at her with mild confusion. "Ma'am, we have a permit," he said. "We've been instructed to start work here." Lena shook her head, trying to keep calm. "Permit? I haven't signed anything. And I haven't been contacted about any construction. This is my land." The foreman hesitated. He muttered something about city approvals and paperwork, but his words were vague and he couldn't show her any documents on the spot. Lena felt a surge of frustration. She knew her land, every corner of it, and no paper, or man, was going to convince her otherwise. By evening, the trucks had moved slightly but were still near her property. The smell of wet cement filled the air, mixing with the scent of her roses. She called her lawyer and described the situation, sending photos of the trucks and their markings. Her lawyer assured her that there were legal ways to stop them, but Lena felt the urgency herself. This wasn't just about paperwork. It was about respect and the principle that her property belonged to her. The next morning brought even more tension. Lena stepped outside early to check her garden and saw fresh tire marks cutting across her soil. Someone had driven across her land while she slept. The neat rows of her flowers had been trampled in places. Anger boiled inside her, but she took deep breaths, focusing on documenting everything. She took photos, notes, and even recorded the sounds of the trucks rumbling near her property. Neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering. Some offered support. Others stayed silent, unsure of how this would end. Lena approached the construction foreman again, now with a camera in hand. "I need to see that permit," she said firmly. Harold, as he introduced himself, fumbled with papers. He claimed that the city had authorized the construction, but the documents were confusing, contradictory, and in some cases, missing signatures. Lena knew then that this was more than a mistake. It felt like an attempt to push her off her own land. She returned home sitting at her kitchen table, staring at the small map she had drawn of her property. Each corner of the land had significance, each tree, each flower, each stone. She realized that this fight wasn't just about land. It was about her life, her memories, and her right to control her own space. Over the next few days, Lena became more vigilant. She would walk her property multiple times a day, checking for new tire marks, watching for unfamiliar faces, and documenting every interaction. The workers tried to continue their tasks, sometimes hesitating when she approached. On one afternoon, she arrived just as they were about to pour a small patch of concrete near the edge of her garden. She ran toward them, shouting over the noise of the truck. "Stop, this is my land. You cannot do this." For a moment, no one moved. The foreman, Harold, looked around at his crew and then back at Lena. "We have orders," he said. "We have to follow them." Lena's voice didn't waver. Orders don't give you the right to destroy someone else's property. Leave or I'll take action. It was then that Lena realized she couldn't rely solely on confrontation. She needed the law. She called her lawyer again, sending images and notes about every trespass, every action, and every statement made by the construction crew. Her lawyer explained that cases like this could take months, but Lena didn't care. She had already decided that she would fight to the end. The community began to notice. Some neighbors came over offering to help document the trucks, take photos, and witness her interactions. Local children, curious and confused, watched from a distance, whispering questions about why a few cement trucks could cause so much trouble. Lena explained to them in simple terms, this land belonged to someone, and respect for others' property was important. One evening, after another long day of monitoring the trucks, Lena sat on her porch, exhausted but determined. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across her garden. She thought about her parents, about how they had cherished this land, and she promised herself that she would not let it be taken away without a fight. The next week brought more tension. Harold returned with additional workers, claiming that the project needed to move forward immediately. Lena stood her ground, calling the local authorities to report trespassing. Officers came and spoke with her and the foreman. After reviewing her documentation, they told Harold to pause work until proper permits could be confirmed. This small victory felt enormous. Lena knew the battle wasn't over, but she felt a sense of relief. She spent that evening walking her property, checking each corner, touching the petals of her flowers, and appreciating the quiet that was still hers. She realized that the fight for her land wasn't just legal. It was emotional, deeply tied to her identity and her history. In the days that followed, Lena prepared for the inevitable legal battle. She gathered documents, historical property records, photos of her land over the years, and even testimonies from neighbors who had watched the trucks trespass. She wanted to be ready for every argument, every claim, and every possible attempt to undermine her rights. At night, Lena would sit in her small living room, reviewing notes, thinking about strategy, and visualizing the construction trucks being turned away. She imagined her garden intact, her flowers undisturbed, her trees casting peaceful shadows over her land. These mental images gave her strength, reminding her that the fight was worth it. Her story started to gain attention. Some local media outlets caught wind of the incident, fascinated by a single landowner standing up to large construction companies. Lena didn't seek fame, but she realized that publicity could help her case, showing that ordinary people could defend their rights. Neighbors continued to support her, bringing food, helping document the site, and offering advice. Even small gestures, like a neighbor handing her a bottle of water while she watched the trucks, made her feel less alone in the struggle. It was clear that this battle wasn't just about her land. It was about the community standing up for fairness and justice. As part 1 closes, Lena remains vigilant. The cement trucks are still near her property, though paused for now. She has prepared evidence, gathered allies, and steeled herself for the legal and emotional battle ahead. She knows the road will be long, but she also knows that her determination and care for her land make her strong. This is only the beginning, the first chapter in a story where her right to her own property will be tested, challenged, and eventually defended. The pause in construction gave Lena a small sense of relief, but it was only temporary. She knew the trucks were still parked near her land, looming like gray giants ready to move at any moment. The workers lingered, and Harold, the foreman, seemed more impatient than ever. Every day brought new challenges, and Lena understood that this was becoming bigger than she had imagined. Early the next morning, she stepped outside to inspect her garden. Her flowers swayed gently in the breeze, but the sight of the cement trucks parked just a few meters from her fence made her stomach tighten. She made her way carefully around the perimeter of her land, checking for tire marks or disturbances. Sure enough, there were new tracks where the trucks had tried to get closer, stopping just before she arrived. Her anger rose, but she reminded herself to stay calm. This was a battle of patience as much as courage. Lena called her lawyer again, explaining that the foreman was clearly testing her resolve. Her lawyer advised her to continue documenting everything, every action, every word. Lena took the advice seriously. She photographed the trucks, their tires, the workers, and even the dirt they had displaced near the edge of her garden. Every detail could count in court. Later that day, Harold approached her again. This time his tone was sharper, less cautious. "Ma'am," he said, "we're just trying to do our job. The city has approved this." "There's nothing personal here." Lena shook her head. "Your job is not to destroy someone else's property. You may think this is approved, but it's not. I own this land. I will not let anyone proceed without my permission." Harold frowned, glancing at the cement trucks idling behind him. "You don't understand. We have deadlines. This isn't about you personally. You just need to let us do our work." Lena's voice stayed firm. "I understand perfectly. You can't work on private property without permission. That's simple. If you proceed, you will be trespassing, and I will take legal action." The standoff lasted several minutes. Harold's team shuffled uncomfortably, glancing at the trucks and back at Lena. Finally, Harold muttered something under his breath and walked back to the trucks, leaving Lena standing in the center of her land, a mix of relief and apprehension flooding her. She knew this wasn't over. Over the next few days, Lena focused on organizing her evidence. She created a small notebook where she recorded every interaction with Harold and his crew, every truck that moved, and even the time and weather conditions when events occurred. She also spoke with neighbors, some of whom had witnessed the trucks trespassing. They agreed to provide statements if necessary, strengthening her case. One afternoon, Lena's phone rang. It was a neighbor, breathless and concerned. "Lena, the trucks. They've started pouring concrete in a corner near your fence. You have to see this." Lena grabbed her camera and rushed outside. Sure enough, a small patch of cement had been poured, spreading over the edge of her property. She could feel her heart pounding as she approached the workers. "Stop," she shouted. "This is my property. You are not allowed to do this." Harold came forward, trying to explain. "Ma'am, the city has approved this. We have instructions to continue." Lena's anger flared, but she kept her composure. "You have no right to do anything on my land. Leave now or I will report every one of you." The workers hesitated, unsure what to do. Lena took photos of the wet concrete, her notes detailing the exact location and the extent of the trespass. She called the local authorities immediately. Within an hour, officers arrived, speaking with her, Harold, and the crew. After reviewing the situation, the officers instructed the workers to stop all activity until proper legal documentation could be verified. This small victory gave Lena hope. She spent the evening inspecting her garden, making minor repairs where the trucks had disturbed the soil. She also called her lawyer, who advised her to prepare for a more formal legal battle. "This is going to take time," he said, "but the documentation you are collecting is crucial. Every photo, every note, every witness account strengthens your case." The following week, the tension grew. Harold seemed frustrated, and some workers returned sporadically, attempting small acts of intimidation. They would idle near her property, engine noises echoing through the quiet street as if daring her to react. Lena stayed firm. She photographed them, recorded their movements, and kept detailed notes. She refused to be intimidated. During this time, Lena discovered more about the so-called permit Harold had mentioned. After requesting copies from the city, she learned that the document was incomplete, unsigned, and, in some parts, forged. This revelation strengthened her resolve. She realized that she was not just defending her property, but exposing negligence and potential wrongdoing. Lena's determination inspired her neighbors. A few came over to help clean up the minor damage caused by the trucks and to offer moral support. Others volunteered to witness any future trespassing or interactions with the construction crew. The sense of community became a source of strength for Lena, reminding her that she wasn't fighting alone. The media caught wind of the story around this time. A local news outlet came to interview her, intrigued by a woman standing up against large construction trucks and city bureaucracy. Lena was hesitant at first. She didn't want attention, only justice. But she realized that publicity could help her cause. The reporter recorded her explanation clearly. She owned her land, no permission had been granted, and she was fighting to protect her property. Her story began spreading beyond the neighborhood. People on social media commented on her courage, some offering advice, others sharing similar experiences. Lena didn't have time to respond to everyone, but the support was comforting. She felt a growing sense of responsibility, not just to her land, but to anyone who might face a similar situation. Court hearings began shortly after. Lena worked closely with her lawyer to prepare her case, gathering evidence and organizing her notes. The foreman, Harold, and the construction company representatives attended, claiming they had been misled by city officials. Lena's lawyer argued that no mistake could justify trespassing or property damage. Every photograph, every witness statement, and every piece of documentation was presented clearly and systematically. The courtroom became an arena where patience and persistence mattered, as much as legal arguments. Lena attended every session, speaking calmly and clearly when given the opportunity. She described the history of her land, her connection to it, and the events that had unfolded with the trucks. Her voice did not tremble, even when describing the moments she had felt most frustrated or afraid. Outside the courtroom, Lena continued to monitor her property. Some workers tried to move equipment closer, but neighbors kept watch and any activity was documented immediately. Each day was a mix of stress and determination, small victories and minor setbacks. Lena began to understand that this was more than a battle over land. It was a test of her perseverance, her knowledge of her rights, and her ability to stand firm under pressure. One particularly challenging day, Harold returned with a new crew, claiming that minor repairs needed to be done immediately. Lena confronted them as before, calling the authorities and documenting the encounter. The officers arrived quickly, instructing the workers to leave until legal confirmation could be provided. Lena felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The battle was ongoing, but each day she stood her ground. The cement trucks remained at bay and her land was still hers. Lena also took the time to educate herself about property rights and local laws. She read legal texts, researched previous cases, and spoke with experts in real estate law. Knowledge became her strongest weapon, giving her confidence that she could defend her land both in court and in reality. She realized that courage alone was not enough. Preparation, information, and meticulous attention to detail were essential. Community support continued to grow. Some neighbors organized a small watch group, checking for unauthorized activity and helping Lena maintain the integrity of her property. Local businesses contributed resources, offering small favors, equipment, and advice. Lena felt the sense of connection deepen. This wasn't just her fight. It was a community standing for fairness and respect. As the days turned into weeks, the construction company faced increasing scrutiny. City officials began investigating the permit issue, uncovering negligence and falsified documents. Lena's persistence had forced authorities to take action, and the pressure on the company grew. She realized that her determination was having a ripple effect, impacting not just her land, but the broader system that allowed such mistakes or abuses to happen. Through all this, Lena maintained her daily routines. She tended to her garden, prepared meals, and spent quiet evenings reviewing her notes. The trucks remained near her property, paused but still a looming threat. Each day was a test of patience, a reminder that justice required time, persistence, and careful action. The story of the cement trucks became a symbol in her neighborhood, representing the importance of standing up for one's rights. Children whispered about the woman who stopped the big trucks, and neighbors used her example to explain respect for property and community responsibility. Lena did not seek recognition, but the support was motivating. She felt empowered knowing that her actions had meaning beyond herself. As Part 2 comes to a close, the battle has intensified, but Lena remains steadfast. The cement trucks have not left, the legal process is underway, and the community stands with her. She knows the road ahead is long, but her determination, knowledge, and unwavering sense of justice give her the strength to face whatever comes next. Every day she walks her land, touches her flowers, and remembers that this fight is about more than concrete. It is about principles, perseverance, and protecting what is rightfully hers. The first court hearing was a mixture of nerves and determination for Lena. She had spent weeks preparing, organizing her notes, photographing every inch of her property, and gathering statements from neighbors who had witnessed the trespassing. Yet walking into the courtroom was a completely different experience. The smell of polished wood, the low murmur of people, and the seriousness of the judge's expressions reminded her that this was no longer a private struggle. It had entered the formal world of law. Lena sat at the plaintiff's table, her lawyer beside her, folders of evidence stacked neatly. Across from her were the representatives of the construction company, including Harold, the foreman who had been at the center of the conflict from the start. Their faces were calm, but there was a faint tension in the room. Everyone knew this case would not be quick, and no one wanted to lose. The judge called the court to order. Papers rustled, voices quieted, and the hearing began. Lena's lawyer presented the evidence first, explaining how the construction company had trespassed on private property without permission, documenting every instance of truck movement, concrete pouring, and damage to the garden. Lena watched as the judge reviewed photographs, maps, and notes, nodding occasionally but remaining neutral. Then Harold and the company representatives presented their side. They claimed they were acting under city orders, following permits that were, according to them, fully approved. Lena had seen this play before: vague statements, assumptions, and evasions. She sat quietly, listening, knowing that the truth of the land and her careful documentation would speak louder than excuses. After the first hearing, the judge decided to delay any immediate decisions and asked both sides to provide more evidence. Lena left the courtroom with mixed emotions. She was relieved to have presented her side clearly, but anxious because the construction company was persistent and the legal system moved slowly. The next weeks were filled with preparation, communication with neighbors, and visits to her property to ensure no further unauthorized activity occurred. One morning, Lena discovered new tire tracks near her vegetable garden. Someone had attempted to drive a smaller vehicle onto her land, perhaps hoping she would be too busy or distracted to notice. Lena felt a surge of frustration, but she stayed calm. She photographed the tracks, took soil samples for documentation, and made detailed notes of the timing. She realized the construction company, or someone acting on their behalf, was testing her patience and boundaries. Meanwhile, Lena's lawyer worked tirelessly to strengthen her case. They reviewed the permits, contacting the city officials to confirm the legitimacy of the documents. It turned out that the permit Harold had repeatedly mentioned was incomplete and partially forged. This discovery was crucial. Lena now had clear evidence that the company's claims were based on falsified paperwork, strengthening her position significantly. During this period, Lena also spent time educating herself about property law, construction regulations, and past court cases. She learned about boundary disputes, trespassing laws, and civil procedures. Knowledge became a weapon as sharp as any legal argument. She realized that the more she understood, the more confident she felt speaking in court and presenting her evidence. As the next hearing approached, Lena met with neighbors who had witnessed the trespassing. They rehearsed their statements, ensuring that they could clearly explain what they had seen. Some neighbors were nervous, worried about speaking in court, but Lena reassured them. "We are standing up for what is right. We are defending our community, not just my land." The day of the hearing arrived, and Lena walked into the courtroom feeling both nervous and empowered. The judge reviewed new documents from both sides, and her lawyer presented additional evidence showing that the company had knowingly entered her land without proper authorization. Photos, videos, and witness testimonies created a clear picture. Lena had been vigilant, documenting everything, and the construction company had acted recklessly. Harold tried to argue that the land had been misunderstood as public property, but Lena's lawyer countered with historical records proving her ownership, boundary maps, and official property tax documents. The judge examined every detail carefully, asking questions about the events, the documentation, and the sequence of actions. Lena answered confidently, explaining the events calmly, without anger but with conviction. Outside the courtroom, tension in the neighborhood grew. The story of a woman standing up to large construction trucks had spread, and people gathered near the street to watch the trucks that still lingered by her property. Some neighbors brought snacks and water for Lena and her lawyer, small gestures of support that reminded her she was not alone. Children peeked from behind fences, curious about the drama unfolding near their homes. Back inside the courtroom, more evidence was presented. Lena's lawyer highlighted the emotional impact of the trespassing, not just the physical damage. Her garden, cultivated over years, represented not only her work but her family's history and memories. The judge listened intently, asking Lena questions about her connection to the land and the significance of the property to her life. Lena's honest, heartfelt responses made a strong impression, showing that this was more than a legal matter. It was about respect, personal space, and integrity. Days turned into weeks as hearings continued. Each session was a mix of stress, minor victories, and careful strategy. Lena continued to document every truck movement, any attempt by the company to approach her land, and the small damages caused by their presence. She also spent time repairing her garden, ensuring that her property remained as pristine as possible, despite the ongoing threat. One particularly tense day, Harold returned with a new crew, attempting to survey a section of the land near the garden again. Lena confronted them immediately, calling local authorities. Officers arrived quickly, instructing the crew to leave and reinforcing that any further trespassing could result in legal penalties. Lena documented the interaction, taking notes and photographs, knowing this would strengthen her case in court. The construction company, frustrated by repeated delays and legal challenges, began to send letters attempting to negotiate or intimidate Lena. Some letters threatened legal costs. Others suggested compromises that she had no intention of accepting. Lena reviewed each letter carefully, discussing strategies with her lawyer. She remained steadfast, refusing to give in to pressure. Her position was clear. Her land was hers and she would not compromise her rights. Community support continued to grow. Neighbors volunteered to monitor the property, sharing updates and helping record any suspicious activity. Small businesses in town contributed resources, offering supplies, equipment, and advice. Lena began to see her struggle as part of a larger fight for fairness, one that resonated with the people around her. The neighborhood's unity became a source of strength, reminding her that she was not alone in standing up for justice. As court proceedings continued, more evidence emerged showing negligence on the part of the city officials who had allegedly approved the permits. The judge requested additional documents and clarification, putting pressure on both the construction company and the city. Lena felt a mix of relief and anticipation, realizing that her persistence and careful documentation were beginning to have tangible effects. During this period, Lena also reflected on the personal lessons she had learned. She had discovered patience she didn't know she had, a sense of strategy, and the importance of clear communication. She had faced intimidation, uncertainty, and stress, yet she remained focused and determined. Her garden, her home, and her rights were worth every effort, and she felt a growing sense of empowerment. In court, Lena's lawyer made a compelling case, combining legal arguments with evidence of trespassing, emotional impact, and the falsification of permits. Witnesses from the neighborhood testified, recounting what they had seen and emphasizing the repeated attempts by the construction company to enter her land. The courtroom became a stage where persistence, preparation, and truth worked together to create a strong defense. Outside, the cement trucks remained parked, a constant reminder of the stakes. Lena inspected her property daily, ensuring that nothing was damaged further. She spent time with neighbors, discussing strategy, sharing updates, and planning for potential challenges. The sense of community deepened, and Lena realized that her fight had become symbolic, a story of ordinary people standing up for their rights against larger, more powerful forces. Weeks passed and the hearings continued. Lena's health, energy, and determination were tested, but she remained committed. Each day brought new evidence, witness testimonies, and careful cross-examinations. Lena's preparation, meticulous documentation, and steadfast resolve impressed both the judge and the courtroom attendees. She had turned what could have been a stressful, overwhelming experience into a carefully managed defense of her land and rights. By the end of Part 3, Lena had firmly established her case. The court recognized the seriousness of the trespassing, the falsified permits, and the construction company's disregard for private property. While the final decision had not yet been made, it was clear that Lena's persistence, knowledge, and community support had created a powerful foundation for justice. Lena walked through her garden that evening, the sun casting long shadows over the carefully tended flowers. The cement trucks were still present, looming nearby, but she felt a sense of quiet strength. She knew the battle was far from over, but she had proven something important, not only to the court or the construction company, but to herself. She could stand firm, defend what was hers, and insist on fairness no matter how powerful the opposition seemed. As Part 3 closes, the stage is set for the final confrontation. Lena has prepared, documented, and built a network of support. She understands the stakes and knows that justice requires patience, vigilance, and courage. The cement trucks may still loom, but Lena's determination is unwavering. She is ready for whatever comes next, prepared to protect her land and uphold the principle that one's property and rights cannot be ignored. The weeks that followed felt heavier than anything Lena had experienced before. Each day brought a new challenge, and every morning she woke to the rumble of trucks that refused to leave. The cement trucks, which had initially been a strange disruption, had become looming symbols of the conflict that had consumed her life. Lena's garden, once a sanctuary of peace, now seemed a fragile line between order and chaos. One morning she stepped outside before sunrise, a habit she had adopted to check the perimeter before any work could begin. Dew covered the flowers and grass, and the air smelled fresh, but her eyes immediately went to the tracks in the soil. Someone had attempted to move closer again. Tire marks led toward the center of her land, a bold encroachment on what was clearly hers. Her stomach tightened. This was no longer an occasional mistake, it was a deliberate test. Lena knew she needed to act carefully. She called her lawyer, explaining the latest trespass. Her lawyer reminded her to continue documenting everything meticulously, but he also stressed patience. The law moved slowly, and any reaction made in haste could weaken her position. Lena listened carefully, taking deep breaths, reminding herself that her determination had to be guided by strategy. Harold, the foreman, arrived later that day with a slightly larger crew. They lingered near the edge of her property, measuring and discussing in low voices. Lena approached, calm but firm. "This is my property. You are not allowed here. Leave now," she said. Harold raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, we have instructions. We can't just walk away. The project must continue." Lena's eyes narrowed slightly. "You do not have permission to work on my land. Your instructions are irrelevant. Leave, or I will contact authorities again." For several tense minutes they stared at each other. The crew shifted uneasily, clearly aware that Lena knew her rights. Finally, Harold muttered something about checking with the office and led the men away. Lena exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. The trucks were still there, but she had held the line. The legal battle intensified. Lena's lawyer submitted additional evidence to the court, highlighting repeated trespassing and the forged permits. The judge called for detailed explanations from the construction company, requiring them to justify every action. The process was slow and meticulous, each session stretching her patience, yet Lena remained committed. She attended every hearing, answering questions with clarity, explaining her connection to the land, and demonstrating her diligence in documenting every incident. Meanwhile, the neighborhood became more involved. Neighbors began forming small watch groups, taking turns observing the property and reporting any unusual activity. Lena was surprised and grateful for the support. Some brought cameras, others brought snacks and water, and a few simply offered companionship during long days of monitoring. She realized that her struggle was no longer only about her land. It had become a symbol of standing up for fairness and respect in the community. One afternoon, the construction company tried a different tactic. Workers approached the boundary quietly, seemingly hoping Lena would be distracted. They measured soil and marked areas with small flags, attempting to make their presence seem innocuous. Lena spotted them immediately. She rushed to the edge of her property, waving her hands and calling loudly, "Stop, this is private property." "You are not allowed here." Harold appeared once again, his frustration evident. "Ma'am, we are just measuring." "It won't take long," he said. Lena shook her head firmly. "Measuring without permission is trespassing. Every step you take here is illegal. Leave now or face consequences." The standoff lasted longer than usual. Bystanders gathered quietly, some whispering, some just observing. Finally, the crew retreated, but the tension lingered like a heavy cloud over her property. Lena documented the interaction carefully, taking photos of every measurement mark, tire track, and flag. Every detail mattered. That evening, Lena reviewed her notes and evidence. She felt the emotional weight of the battle. The stress of constant vigilance was exhausting, but it also strengthened her resolve. She realized that perseverance was as crucial as legal knowledge. This fight was testing her patience, resilience, and the very core of her character. The court hearings continued. Lena's lawyer called in neighbors as witnesses, asking them to testify about the repeated trespassing and the visible damages to the property. Their statements reinforced Lena's case, showing that the construction company had acted knowingly and repeatedly. Harold and the company representatives struggled to justify their actions, unable to present a clear and truthful explanation. During one hearing, Lena was asked to speak about her connection to the land. She described the hours she had spent planting and nurturing her garden, the memories tied to every tree and flower, and the sense of safety and peace her property gave her. Her words resonated with the courtroom. This was not just about soil and boundaries. It was about life, care, and respect. The judge listened attentively, nodding as Lena spoke. Outside the courtroom, the tension remained high. The cement truck still stood near her property, silent but imposing. Lena continued her daily routine of inspection, documentation, and communication with her lawyer. She spent hours repairing minor damages, clearing dirt from tire tracks, and ensuring her garden remained as beautiful as possible. These small acts of care were her way of reclaiming some control over the chaos around her. One night, Lena received a threatening letter, suggesting that she should settle quickly or face consequences. Her first reaction was anger, but she took a deep breath and showed the letter to her lawyer. They agreed it was an intimidation tactic. Lena responded calmly, documenting the letter and continuing her work. She refused to be bullied. Community support strengthened further. Volunteers helped monitor the land, checking for any new activity and providing reports. Local businesses offered assistance, lending tools, cameras, and advice. Lena began to feel a sense of unity and purpose. She realized that her fight had become more than personal. It was about standing for principles and inspiring others to defend what was rightfully theirs. The construction company, frustrated by repeated delays, tried to pressure city officials to move forward. However, the court proceedings and Lena's meticulous evidence made it difficult for them to act. Every attempt to bypass the legal process only strengthened Lena's position. She knew that patience and persistence were her greatest allies. As the weeks passed, the emotional stakes grew. Lena faced sleepless nights, constant anxiety, and the stress of maintaining her property under threat. Yet she also experienced moments of quiet pride and resilience. She walked through her garden in the early morning, touched the petals of her flowers, and felt a connection to her land that no truck or company could break. During this period, she continued educating herself about property laws, construction regulations, and legal procedures. She consulted with experts, read case studies, and practiced presenting her evidence clearly. Lena realized that knowledge was power, and preparation was her shield against intimidation. One particularly tense morning, the construction company sent a surveyor onto the property without warning. Lena noticed the vehicle immediately. She ran outside, documenting every movement, and called the authorities. Officers arrived promptly, instructing the surveyor to leave. Lena recorded the interaction thoroughly, ensuring every detail was captured for the court. The emotional toll was significant. Lena felt fear, frustration, and exhaustion, but she also felt determination, courage, and a sense of justice. She reminded herself daily why she was fighting, not just for her land, but for fairness, respect, and the principle that private property must be protected. Neighbors continued to rally around her. Some helped with garden maintenance, others documented activity near the trucks, and a few simply offered words of encouragement. The sense of community became a lifeline, reminding Lena that she was not alone in her struggle. In court, her lawyer presented detailed evidence of trespassing, intimidation, and falsified permits. Witnesses testified, photos and videos were shown, and every detail of Lena's careful documentation was examined. Harold and the construction company struggled to provide clear explanations, and their attempts to deflect responsibility only reinforced Lena's case. By the end of Part 4, the battle had reached a critical point. Lena had proven her diligence, her patience, and her unwavering commitment to defending her property. The court recognized the seriousness of the situation, and the construction company faced increasing scrutiny from both legal authorities and the community. Lena walked through her garden that evening, the sun casting golden light over her carefully tended flowers. The cement truck still loomed in the distance, but she felt a deep sense of strength and accomplishment. She had faced repeated threats, intimidation, and legal challenges, yet she remained resolute. Her land, her rights, and her principles had not been compromised. The stage was set for the final resolution. Lena had prepared meticulously, gathered community support, and maintained her vigilance. The cement trucks represented ongoing tension, but Lena's determination and careful planning made it clear that she would not be defeated. She had learned that standing up for what was right required patience, courage, and unwavering commitment, and she was ready for whatever came next. The day the final court hearing was scheduled, Lena woke early, as she had countless times before, her heart heavy with anticipation. Months of tension, sleepless nights, and constant vigilance had led to this moment. The cement truck still loomed near her property, silent, waiting as though they knew the outcome of the battle would decide their fate. Lena dressed carefully, bringing a small notebook filled with every detail she had meticulously recorded. Photographs, witness statements, notes about tire marks, measurements, and every interaction with the construction crew. When she arrived at the courtroom, she felt a strange mix of nerves and calm determination. Her lawyer greeted her with a reassuring smile, reminding her of how far they had come. Lena had fought with patience, intelligence, and courage, and this final hearing was simply the last step in a process she had controlled every step of the way. The courtroom was quiet as the judge called the session to order. Lena watched Harold and the company representatives enter, their expressions unreadable. She focused on her notebook, reviewing notes quietly, reminding herself that preparation and persistence had brought her here. Her lawyer began presenting the evidence systematically. Photos showed the repeated trespassing, the tire marks, the concrete poured near her garden, and the measurement flags left behind. Neighbor witnesses described what they had seen: the boldness of the trucks, the repeated attempts to cross her property, and the intimidation tactics used by the crew. Lena listened quietly, her presence calm but commanding. She had prepared for every question, every challenge, every argument the construction company could make. When the company representatives spoke, they tried once again to claim that the city had authorized their actions. Harold testified that he had been following instructions and that any missteps were accidental. But Lena's evidence contradicted every claim. The permits they presented were incomplete, unsigned, and partially forged. Every photograph, every recorded interaction, every detailed note from Lena made the company's excuses crumble. The judge asked Lena to describe her connection to the property, not just as ownership, but as a personal place. She spoke about the years she had spent caring for her garden, the flowers and trees she had nurtured, and the memories tied to each corner of her land. Her words were simple but filled with emotion, and the courtroom listened. This was more than a legal battle. It was a story of care, commitment, and respect for what belonged to her. Neighbors who had witnessed the events also testified, confirming that the construction company had repeatedly attempted to trespass, sometimes even when the authorities had instructed them to stop. Their statements reinforced Lena's claims, painting a clear picture. This was not a misunderstanding. The company had acted knowingly, deliberately, and persistently. As the hearing progressed, Lena realized the power of her preparation. Every detail she had recorded, every witness she had gathered, every photo she had taken now formed a complete, undeniable narrative. The judge reviewed each piece carefully, asking questions that highlighted the construction company's failure to respect property rights. Outside the courtroom, tension ran high. Neighbors gathered near her property, watching the trucks, whispering updates to each other. Some children peeked from behind fences, curious about the drama, while adults discussed the importance of standing up for one's rights. Lena had become an example, a figure of resilience and determination in the face of powerful opposition. Back inside, Lena's lawyer summarized the case. He emphasized that the company had trespassed multiple times, disregarded the law, and attempted to intimidate a property owner. He highlighted Lena's meticulous documentation, her perseverance, and the community support that confirmed the truth of her claims. The judge listened attentively, clearly impressed by the clarity and thoroughness of the case. The construction company tried to argue that delays and misunderstandings had been caused by city miscommunication. However, every attempt to shift responsibility was countered by Lena's evidence and the witnesses' accounts. Even Harold's own testimony revealed contradictions, making it clear that the company had acted recklessly, regardless of any city orders. After hours of presentations, witness testimonies, and legal arguments, the judge called for a short recess. Lena stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air, her mind racing. The trucks were still there, but she felt a sense of quiet strength. She had done everything she could to prepare, to fight fairly, and to stand her ground. Now the decision was out of her hands, but her confidence came from knowing she had acted with integrity and determination. When the court reconvened, the judge delivered the decision. Lena listened, her heart pounding as the words confirmed everything she had fought for. The construction company was ordered to immediately vacate her property. Any further attempts to enter without explicit permission would result in legal penalties, including fines and potential criminal charges. The judge also noted the repeated trespassing, the forged permits, and the emotional impact on Lena, emphasizing the importance of respecting private property rights. Relief and joy washed over Lena. Months of tension, sleepless nights, and constant vigilance had culminated in this moment. The cement trucks, once symbols of intimidation and intrusion, would finally leave her land. She felt a profound sense of victory, not just in winning the case, but in standing up for what was right, protecting her property, and demonstrating that ordinary people could defend themselves against powerful forces. The construction company began to remove its equipment from the property immediately. Harold and his crew moved the truck slowly, avoiding any further disturbance. Lena watched carefully, documenting the removal as she had documented every previous trespass. The land that had been threatened and tested now began to regain its peace. Neighbors came by to congratulate Lena. Some hugged her, others shook her hand, and many simply stood nearby, sharing in the relief and joy. Children ran through the garden, curious and excited, while adults marveled at her courage. Lena felt a deep sense of connection and gratitude. Her fight had not been hers alone. It had involved a community standing together for fairness and respect. In the days that followed, Lena worked to restore her property fully. She repaired soil, replanted flowers that had been trampled, and removed debris left by the construction crews. Every corner of her garden was tended with care, each flower and tree a testament to her persistence and love for her land. She also reflected on the lessons she had learned. Standing up for one's rights required patience, courage, and careful preparation. Knowledge was power, and persistence could overcome intimidation. Lena realized that the battle had strengthened her, teaching her resilience, determination, and the importance of protecting what mattered most. The community continued to support her. Some neighbors helped with gardening, while others provided moral support and shared in the celebration of her victory. The story of her stand against the cement truck spread beyond the neighborhood, inspiring others to defend their rights and respect the property of others. Lena had become a symbol of courage and determination, a reminder that ordinary people could protect themselves when they acted with care and conviction. Months later, the property had returned to its peaceful state. The cement trucks were gone and the land was restored to its previous condition. Lena spent time in her garden reflecting on the journey. She had faced repeated challenges, intimidation, and uncertainty, yet she had remained steadfast. Her land, her memories, and her principles were intact. Lena's story became a quiet legend in the community. People spoke of the woman who stood her ground against powerful construction trucks and refused to yield. She had shown that determination, preparation, and courage could overcome challenges that seemed overwhelming. Her example encouraged others to respect private property and to stand up for fairness in their own lives. Looking back, Lena felt a profound sense of pride and satisfaction. The battle had been long and exhausting, but it had also been transformative. She had discovered resilience, patience, and the power of community support. Most importantly, she had protected her land, her memories, and her right to control what was hers. As the sun set over her garden, Lena walked among the flowers, touching petals, brushing leaves, and feeling the earth beneath her feet. The cement trucks were gone, and peace had returned to her property. She smiled, knowing that justice had been served, not just through the court's decision, but through her unwavering commitment to stand up for what was right. The story of Lena and the cement trucks remained a powerful reminder that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when they fought with courage, care, and determination. Her land was safe, her principles upheld, and her community strengthened. Lena had proven that respect for others' property, patience, and steadfastness could triumph over intimidation, deceit, and force. Her garden thrived once more, every flower a symbol of resilience. The trees cast protective shadows in the soil, tilled and